Hey, good morning. I'm Janel Forte. As we all know, it is now time for back to school. And today we're going to talk all about dress code when it comes to schools. I have Dr. Anthony Mays here. You're with the Harris County Department of Education, and you are the school's director.
Yes, ma'am.
You want to tell the people a little bit about yourself?
So I'm Anthony Mays again, Dr. Anthony Mays, Senior Director of Schools with the Harris County Department of Education, where we have several schools right here around the county, and we work to meet the needs of the students within Harris County.
So lots of parents have plenty of questions going into this new school year with the different dress code policies at the different schools throughout the Houston area. What is kind of the big ticket item when it comes to back to school and dress code?
The big ticket item is, again, knowing that dress code is there to support student success, is there to help the students stay safe, and again, help students become familiar with the next steps or the next phases in their life. So.
And then what do parents need to know? I know most parents have done most of their back to school shopping already, but what do they need to know before sending their kid into school for those first days?
Before those first days, know that, again, it's a process you got to calibrate, and so, you know, as you're transitioning back to school, sometimes there's challenges with trying to figure out exactly what's appropriate and what's not. And so, you know, parents get to go through this adjustment phase as well as students. And so what I would say for parents is to bear with the district and the student or the school officials as they work to kind of, you know, determine what's right and what's wrong.
And then when it comes to speaking with your child about dress code policy, I know when I was in high school, and they're like, well, Mom, I want to wear this. Like, why can't I wear this? So how do you have those conversations?
Yeah. So those conversations, of course, are
That's what happened in Michigan when a pastor called upon his congregation to help his community. His pastor and his church paid off the medical debt of 1,899 families. Pastor Sam Rafkofchel learned of a Texas church that paid medical debt for people, and he wanted to do the same. The organization that made it possible was
their individuality, because that's usually what they want to do.
And I know we talked about this before this started, but you have kids of your own, so how do you have those conversations with your children?
Yeah, well, actually, my daughter probably has it the toughest because her dad, you know, was a principal, so it's like she's at home having to raise her arms up and do all these things before she even makes it out of the house, and so usually she has a pretty stringent test before she has to walk out the house. So, you know, it's just one of those things where, you know, I try to meet her halfway because she likes to wear certain things, but yeah, she has it tough.
And then when it comes to dress code, there's not really a one-size-fits-all when it comes to the different districts and even the different schools within a district here in Houston. Why is that? Why are there different dress codes for different areas?
Well, the dress code is usually driven by local conversations, and so local conversations and local challenges. So, you know, the community, you know, given buy-in, they get the chance to try to determine what's the most appropriate attire for our schools, and so that's not something that, you know, we get to decide for a district that we don't reside in. So that's usually what drives what students will wear within that respective district.
And then I know a lot of people may be wondering, who are the players in deciding the dress code for a different district? I mean, you have your school board, the parents, the community, that sort of thing. So how does that go into play? How does that work?
Yeah, so again, it's about buy-in. So usually those conversations are local. So, you know, parents can, of course, solicit or reach out to board members or school officials, whether that's the principal or teachers or whoever it is that you can make that connection with. But just simply letting them know that, hey, I want to be a part of the conversation will get them to the table to be able to have those conversations. Usually there's committees that drive that dialogue, but the best thing you can do if you're a parent is raise your hand and let them know that I want to be a part of that conversation, I want to be a part of that dialogue so that your voice can be heard.
And then dress code has kind of evolved over the years. I know when I was in high school, a lot of things that we weren't allowed to wear, students are now allowed to wear, and vice versa.
Right.
So can we talk about the evolution of dress code?
Yeah, and so you've watched the evolution of dress code to accommodate various, you know, diversity and culture within schools. You've also seen the evolution of dress code just due to student safety concerns, and so you used to have certain colors where people would stay away from, but now versus only having a couple colors that you can wear, now they're saying, hey, wear a knit polo. And so it doesn't matter what color it is, but wear a knit polo. So again, it's an ongoing conversation between the community, the parents, and the school board staff or the school staff to determine, again, what works for that community. And so those conversations, you know, whether it's you or me, will continue to take place even as
more free electricity for every Texas.
And I know you touched on this a little bit, but in the past 10, 15 years, what are some of the changes that we have seen when it comes to dress code?
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, you go from situations where, you know, maybe earrings were a big concern to not being a concern anymore, or, you know, back in the days where people were wearing, you know, beer t-shirts, that, yeah, you're not going to walk around the campus wearing a beer t-shirt, to just having some solid colors that, hey, we're all going to wear khaki bottoms or denim bottoms, and we're all going to wear a knit polo shirt. Not, you know, necessarily that you can't wear these items or you don't want to wear these items. You want to make sure that, again, we're not, you know, offending anyone. We're not infringing on anyone's rights or religious rights. But again, we want to make sure that we recognize the diversity within schools. So that's where that openness comes from.
Why are there school dress codes, and what benefits do they give parents, teachers, students?
Yeah, well, some of the biggest things that you deal with in those dress codes is that it eliminates a huge distraction in the classroom. And so students aren't, you know, looking at who has on what anymore, and we can really focus on the business of schools. And so it eliminates that challenge for students. And so whether we're looking at bullying or conversations that, again, drive us away from instruction, or what we're there for, you don't have that anymore. And for parents, you know, you get the opportunity of the affordability of dress code. And so you don't have to go out and look for what's trendy, you know. I don't have to go out and spend, you know, huge amounts of money on dress code attire, because it's simple. It's like I go in, I'm picking this shirt or I'm picking these pants, and so it makes it more, you know, it makes it easier for the parent, and it makes it easier and better for that student once they get into their classroom.
And then obviously there's been recent controversies about school dress codes, namely it being discriminatory towards different groups. So how would you address that?
Again, for me, those are local conversations. You know, we sit down and as stakeholders, you pull in those individuals, you pull in those families that may be feeling like or as if they are being discriminated against, and we talk about what is it that's making you feel that way. And we try to meet, we find, you know, common ground to try to determine, you know, what's going to work for our schools, you know, what's going to work for our community, and then we move forward from there. But again, you know, as it relates to dress code, that's an evolving conversation that you got to have that community buy-in. You got to have everybody at the table talking about, you know, what's going to work for us.
And then if a student doesn't like their dress code, how do you have that conversation as a family? How do you tell your student, well, you know, it's in place because of this?
Yeah. Well, you know, unfortunately, students don't always like, again, you know, what the community may leave the table with as a decision. But, you know, again, what I say is you had that conversation with your child. Let's look at where you get to have some freedom, because usually that's what the students are upset about, is the notion that I'm losing, you know, the autonomy and my individuality to choose and select what I want to wear. And so having those conversations with your child is important. You know, you want to sit down and look at, okay, where is the flexibility, and give them those opportunities. That's the most important thing with that.
Is there a different way to address it based on your child's age? Like you have an elementary school kid versus like a high school kid?
I would say no. You know, my 5-year-old wakes up and she wants to select what she's wearing the same way my 10-year-old does. Even my 2-year-old, he'll fuss about what he wants to wear. So, again, I would say no. You continue to give them choices, like, hey, these are your two choices. This is what you can wear. This is what you can't. But put those two side by side and let them have some control. And
then I understand you have some statistics for us when it comes to dress code. You want to?
Yeah. Well, you know, the biggest thing is that you have an increase in schools elected to use dress code. So I don't think it's, again, you know, something that we could look at going away. I think it's one of those things that's going to be here to stay. And again, it's about giving those students the opportunity to be engaged in the classroom and focused on what it is that we need to be in the schools for, which is learning. And so again, that uptick, I want to say we've gone from we're up to about 25% of schools have a dress code at this point, or a dress code or uniform policy at this point.
And then in terms of your department, do you guys play a role in these schools deciding what the dress code is? Do you kind of set guidelines or tell, you know, school districts what works, what may not work?
Right. No, not for local school districts. We go back again to districts have local control. Now we get to decide for the students that attend Harris County schools, but again, or Harris County schools, but again, within the local ISDs, they have the autonomy to have those conversations, to bring the parents to the table and determine what's best for their respective district. But we don't determine what their dress code will be.
And then as far as, I know in HISD, they do campus by campus. Some districts do holistically the whole campus. Why do you think the disparity? In my opinion, I would say that HISD, since it's so vast and it covers so many different areas, that's maybe why they let each campus decide?
Yeah, so I think, you know, like you said, with HISD, because it's so huge and because you have so many various communities that you're serving, it will be difficult to try to manage that probably for the entire district. So having that local autonomy, you know, within the campus or the community is probably going to be pretty important for the different communities that you serve. Again, I think that local control, those local conversations with parents and community stakeholders is critical.
And then I know we've been talking about students, but last year something that made headlines was the dress code for parents going up to the schools. Is that something that you think is going to be seen more widely?
Again, I think it goes back to local control, and so it's one of those things where I always look at, you know, dress code or rules or any of the challenges that we have in schools as an opportunity. And so we have an opportunity to model for students, you know, what's appropriate or what's inappropriate, or, you know, again, show them what the next phase of life may look like for them as they move into the workforce. And so, you know, it's just an opportunity. I don't know that we'll see, you know, schools throughout, you know, Houston or the country adopt a dress code for parents, but again, it's based on that local community and what do they need. So.
And in a moment, we are going to take some questions. I don't know if, Jaime, do we have any questions yet?
Yes, we got one question so far that I would say. One viewer was asking about would like a school uniform make it easier, and maybe, you know, maybe having students wear that Monday through Thursday, and then maybe give them a chance to wear whatever they like.
Like a casual Friday. So the question that we got is from one of the viewers of the Facebook Live. They asked, would a school uniform work out better? And then furthermore, give them Fridays to go casual, kind of like in the workplace.
Yeah. So I think that, you know, for me as a principal, I would always make deals with my kiddos. You know, it's one of those things where, you know, if we could avoid any types of issues throughout the week, then of course, can we give you some freedom on Friday? Yes, we can. Let's take advantage of the opportunity to give that student some control and opportunity to buy into what it is that we're trying to do with the dress code Monday through Thursday. I would think and I would hope that most principals would have that freedom to make that decision on their campus. And so I would say, hey, go for it. What I would encourage the student to do is definitely visit with their school principal and have that conversation to try to, you know, take advantage of that opportunity.
Another question one of our viewers was kind of bringing up, or an issue, is talking to their children about the fit of their clothes, like how tight or how loose,
how short, that sort of thing.
How short, the length of skirts and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, you know, what I encourage parents to do is to, again, have that conversation at home. I think for students, boys and girls, you know, it's more comfortable, you know, having that conversation with a parent versus having it with, you know, an assistant principal who's usually the person that's, you know, catching you out of dress code. And so I think as parents, if we can kind of police it at home as they walk through the door or as they leave us walking out the door, it's going to be important to try to have that conversation with them one-on-one before somebody that they may not be as comfortable with having that conversation, because you don't want to affect the student's self-esteem.
Exactly.
Another kind of issue is just sort of, you know, the issue in talking with children and about what they choose to wear and how it relates to their sort of self-esteem, like how to have that kind of conversation.
Yeah, so, you know, believe it or not, again, if you're having a conversation about self-esteem, the uniform works in your favor because, you know, uniforms are a piece of helping with that self-esteem, because again, you eliminate the envy of, you know, you get to wear such and such and I don't, or you get to wear this name brand and I can't afford it. You know, you take away that piece, and so again, the school uniform works with that regard for supporting self-esteem. And so, you know, for a parent, if you're having that conversation, it ought to be something that's a little easier for you to do, because again, a student gets to have a better sense of self as they walk out the door wearing that uniform. And guess what? everybody has on this uniform, and so there's a sense of pride for the student, and there's also a sense of pride for the school.
Also, what about in terms of sort of like having that discussion in regards to sort of a child's sort of body image, I guess? Is there a way to kind of how to approach that sort of conversation? I guess kind of going back to a little bit more about, you know, kind of the fit of clothes and maybe even the cut. Is there a way to have that sort of conversation?
Yeah, and I'll interject on this too. Especially for young women, depending on when you go through puberty. I remember I went through puberty a little earlier than some of my friends did, and they could wear some things that I just couldn't get away with wearing at school. So how do you have that conversation with your child?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'll be honest with you all. You know, again, I have a 10-year-old daughter that's going into 5th grade, and it's interesting to me to watch her growing up. But it's one of those things that, again, I say, you know, the best person to have that conversation with your child or with a child is the parent. And it's not always easy, and I think that the best thing to do is to make sure that you have that relationship with your child so that, you know, they're willing to tell you, you know, what they're thinking or what they're feeling about what it is that they have on. And trying to make sure that you listen to that and that you do what you can to support them with that. Again, I'm having these conversations with my daughter as she ages now and grows, because she's growing fast. But I think that that's the best approach to it. But I would say relying on a school official to have that conversation will be more of a challenge and may spin into some other issues for a child. So, you know, whether it's mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, whoever's in the family, or, you know, that has that better relationship with the student, should try to have those conversations.
We do have one viewer who just wants to just thank you, Dr. Mays, for providing all this information and all the work that you do every day. Another viewer was sort of asking, you know, about sort of how dress code pertains to teachers and I guess, you know, faculty and staff, and the difference between what they have to, you know, the image they have versus, you know, students.
Yeah. So that was funny, because that was one question I was wondering if it would come up. And so, as you know, the group of teachers, you know, the new incoming teachers get younger, you know, it's one of those things where we are having ongoing conversations about, you know, what's appropriate in the workplace and what's not. And so, because we're modeling for our kiddos what's appropriate and what's not, again, that's an evolving conversation. And so we continue to meet with our teachers, young or old, you know, about, you know, what we want to try to depict for our students in terms of the profession, you know, in education. And so those teachers are held to a standard just the same way those students are as they come into the building. So we try to make sure that we address that if it's, you know, something that we see as an issue, especially at the high school level, where, you know, young men or young women that are at the high school level looking at their teachers as they get ready to prepare for college or the next step. So we definitely try to address that, because we know, especially with high school students, they are pretty relentless in sharing their opinions about some of the things that they come across.
And then I want to circle back on the cultural aspect. So I know one of the things that many districts have in their dress code is about hair. And I know back when I was in high school, like the standard was like you couldn't have a natural hair color. But we see headlines around the country about, you know, students having to cut off their dreads or not being able to wear, you know, like the braids with the extensions and that sort of thing. So how do you have a conversation about that? And then furthermore, how do you have a conversation with your district? I mean, if they have something like that, implement it where it's cultural.
Yeah. So it goes back to, we come back to the table. You know, for me, I was the principal of a high school with nearly 46 different languages spoken. And so we had a number of different religions that were represented there. And so again, while you have your dress code, you have your rules, you know, it's one of those things that if you can, you know, when it's time to have those conversations, we all need to be at the table. But on a case-by-case scenario, I sit down with those students, I sit down with those parents, I sit down with those religious leaders, so we can determine, again, what's the best path moving forward to accommodate this kiddo. Because we don't want to, again, hurt a kid's sense of self-esteem. We don't want to infringe on a student's, you know, religious right or religious beliefs. And so you have to continue having those conversations. You know, it's easy to be rigid, but again, you need to make sure for us as school leaders that we have those conversations with our stakeholders, because at the end of the day, we're there to serve their needs, and it's important that we get that feedback from the group that we're serving.
And then if you are a parent and you want to address these issues, how do you go about doing that? Do you go up to the school? Do you call the school?
So anybody that you can contact in the district, I think, you know, the best point of contact typically is the principal that's serving your campus, your respective campus. But if you can't get in contact with a principal, there's always central office officials that you can browse the web page to try to find a contact. Student services is usually the department that you can reach out to, especially as it relates to dress code. And I have plenty of colleagues around Harris County that I know would be more than happy to help any parent that had a concern or a question about dress code.
And are there statistics that show that by having a dress code, it enhances the learning environment?
Yeah, and so what you get is you get a byproduct of having a dress code. We can't say that there's a direct correlation between, you know, academic performance and, you know, dress code. But what we can say is that the environment that's created as a byproduct of everybody wearing this dress code, being safe, being focused, not being distracted, again, you get enhanced performance from students. And so I would think that for me as a principal, a former principal, that again, that was an important piece of letting my students go into a classroom and be focused, watching them then be able to take that focus and channel it into paying attention to a teacher or focusing on some of the concepts that the teacher was sharing with them versus, you know, getting ready to crack a joke on somebody that may have, you know, a shirt or some shoes or some pants that were off brand, because they'll do it real quick.
Yeah, they will. Anything else over there, Jaime? All right, one more question and then we'll wrap this thing up. Just in terms, I know another article that I was reading was talking about how young girls are policed a little more frequently than young men are. What would you say to that?
Yeah, you know, for me, my experience was that my boys were always a challenge. But with young ladies, for my team, we had a diverse team. So I had female administrators that could have, you know, conversations with young ladies that may have a challenge with dress code. But for me, the expectation is expectation, whether we're talking about a boy or a girl, so the rules should be implemented pretty consistently. But my experience was usually, my challenge was with boys and pulling up their pants or keeping their shirts tucked in. That was usually the challenge that I had. But for our young ladies, again, you know, I had, you know, pretty secure, pretty sensitive female assistant principals that could have that conversation with a young lady, again, without harming a sense of self. But I'll be able to give that young lady the direction that they needed to be able to move forward. But the dress code is a dress code, and you try to implement it consistently, whether you're dealing with a young lady or a young man.
So I'm gonna have you wrap up everything, kind of just, so parents, as your children are headed back to school this week, next week, and the coming weeks, this is the big takeaway when it comes to this dress code conversation.
Yeah, so the big takeaway is that, again, dress code is not there to hurt, it's there to help. And so, you know, again, we want students to be able to go into the classroom and be focused on the main thing, and the main thing is learning. And so as we put that dress code in place, again, it's about allowing that student to go into the classroom and focus on being the best student that they can be.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mays. This will be on YouTube, so if you missed a portion, you can go back and watch it, and of course it'll be on Facebook as well.